All right, everyone, welcome to another session at Park Street University at Bar Convent Berlin. I am Emily Pennington, your ringmaster and the content manager for Park Street. I'm here to open up the Scaling Your Potential panel. So today we have moderator Michael Vachon, co-founder of Maverick Drinks. We have Lisa Laird, the executive vice president and world ambassador for Laird and Company. We have Georgiadis, Managing Director for Never Never Distilling, and James Chase, the Director for Chase Distilling. And with that, I'm going to hand it off with Michael to get going.
So first, Maverick Drinks, we would always say it's not just a distributor, we're actually leading the craft spirits movement in the UK. We think that it isn't just about transacting, it's about building relationships, building partnerships, and building this whole community around craft spirits. So our history, we were founded in September 2013 with 10 brands. We didn't really know what we were doing. We made every mistake you can possibly make, which I'm sure everybody here will also agree with. But still, nevertheless, at the end of our first year, we were awarded the IWSC Spirits Distributor of the Year, which there are not a lot of awards for distributors, but we were pretty pleased to win that one. And our first national partner realized that by selling craft spirits, they could make more money per bottle sold than selling more mainstream products. And they were losing on price with the larger grocers, and we convinced them to change their entire strategy to delist all of the mainstream products and introduce higher value, higher margin craft spirits brands. And that kind of became our mission, which was to help our partners reduce their reliance on mainstream brands and introduce higher quality, higher margin alternatives. And it kind of was born out of that partnership with Majestic Wines in the UK. 2016, we secured our third national partner. Someone actually emailed to hi@maverickdrinks.com and said, hey, we hear you're the people who do craft spirits. Would you mind having a chat with us? And when we realized that people were starting to know us as the craft spirits people, we doubled down on that, and we have put craft into all of our messaging everywhere we go so that we only serve to emphasize that point. And again, we won Distributor of the Year again. 2017, we launched a campaign to talk about the relationship between brands and bars and how that can be improved. And we called that our Forward Drinking campaign. Again, became something we were known for and how we brought the community together to talk about craft spirits and how kind of the pay-to-play model works with bars. And then, yeah, we won Spirits Distributor of the Year again. 2018, we actually partnered with ZX Ventures. So this is all about how we've started to scale. We partnered with ZX Ventures, who are the disruptive growth division of AB InBev, the largest drinks company in the world, and the 26th largest company in the world in terms of consumer goods. So now 2019 is how do we scale everything we do? And we're right in that phase now. We're learning about it every day, and I'll talk a little bit about some of the things we do. But our vision has always been to replace mainstream with craft, full stop. If we see mainstream spirits that we don't think are the best experience a guest could have, well, we think we can do better. And I'm lucky to have tried all of their products, and I know how wonderful they all are. So I know that they join me in that mission. And I thought I'd just quickly touch on what craft means to us. So we talk about craftsmanship, authenticity, quality, provenance, founder, there goes those animations. And the things we leave out are two very important things that actually most people attribute to craft spirits. Independence. We think just because you are independent doesn't make you more or less craft. And scale. We don't think because you're small makes you more craft or because you've scaled up. And we're not in the business of keeping any of the brands that we represent deliberately small just to keep them craft. We want to see every brand we represent be successful. So to that end, craft can scale. We really believe
Absolutely.
It is part and parcel to every one of our values that we are there to scale up craft, not to keep it small. And I think that is, it'll be interesting to hear some of the perspectives from you all. And when I've got a question I'm going to ask, that's basically the first one. And there are many different ways to scale your brand. So some through export, some through investment, some through other partnerships. And again, I think we can explore that from how you each approach that as you've start to scale up your brands. But also, scaling up means different things to different people. So I can tell you firsthand, scaling up to what we were doing in 2018 means a very different thing to what scaling up looks like in terms of being part of ZX Ventures and their growth ambitions for our business. It's a lot bigger. So, but we have a lot more resources to do it. So we've tried to find that balance as to how do we use those resources to best effect to scale up that to our full potential. And last, I'd say being flexible as you scale, because we've certainly had to be a bit more introspective about what are the processes in place that we've held on to, what are the values we've had in place, do those still make sense as we try and scale things? So some of the things we've done is we've scaled craft, and we'll talk a little bit about the value we've created, some of the innovations we've done, collaborations we're looking at, and how we've tried to disrupt in terms of distribution. For starters, as we started making more of things, we lowered the price. So this is an article we had about some gins that we produce within our own business. Adds 40% liquid to 10 of its gins. We raised the bottle volume from 50 cl to 70 cl, and we dropped the price by 40%. And that was purely because we had scale. We were able to buy more raw ingredients. We were able to buy more bottles. We were able to produce more products and pass that on to the consumer. And similarly, from Drinks International, increases bottle sizes for free, which I love that title. And it really, as we're able to deliver more value, we started looking back at more of our brands. Did we even price things correctly in the first place? Well, we're a different business now than we were 2 years ago, and it requires us to be flexible and start to think about those things about our business. But that doesn't mean that craft has to be small. We haven't slowed down innovation. This is broadly what our innovation pipeline looks like. So there's a few products we're making, but we see innovation as key to our scale. Just like somebody who'd be investing in a wide variety of brands, we're going to make a bunch of things, and we're going to distribute a lot of other things that we don't make. And across those, we don't know exactly what's going to be the success, but we're willing to try lots of different things. So by trying new brands that we import and distribute, and also brands that we create in-house, we're going to find winners, hopefully. Time will tell. And lastly, collaboration. So this, again, a brand that we did, but we've collaborated both with brands we distribute, brands we just like, and partner bar brands. So we've actually created, you can see the Panda there is a bar for a gin, specifically for a bar in Edinburgh called Panda and Sons. But we've also done one with a distillery in the United States. We've done one for a bar in London. We just think collaboration helps us build our community. As we scale, we're not losing that touch with our individual bars or the brands we distribute, or just the wider brand community who want to be involved in this project. There's a lot of them. And lastly, we're not sitting on our laurels here in terms of distribution either. We found that in the UK, there's a bottleneck in terms of, and similar to the US, where we need to find someone who will distribute the product to the bars. We don't have the trucks. We sell to what we would call wholesalers. In the US, it's a distributor. But there's no real reason why we couldn't sell direct, except to maybe piss off the wholesalers or something like that. But the wholesalers, the volume of products coming to market, just like in the US and just like in the UK, there's too many products for wholesalers and distributors to take on everything. And so when we have the flexibility to actually sell directly to bars, why shouldn't we do that? Because then we can go to the wholesaler and say, these are proven products. We've now been selling them for however long they're proven. And so this is a model we're launching in the new year, so we can actually start selling directly to bars ourselves and proving these products before we start scaling them up.
So just a little bit about who we are. It was mentioned we have first DSP license, #1. We also have Internal Revenue Bonded Warehouse, #1 in the United States. We are the oldest family of distillers. I represent the 9th generation. Currently, we have 8th, 9th, and 10th generation that is working in our family business. And Applejack is the oldest native distilled spirit in the United States. We predate bourbon by about 100 years. So obviously, I'm going to be talking about mostly about scaling aging inventory, and we're a little bit different because we've been in business for 269 years. But so we've seen a lot of different scales. We've had to be very adept at scaling up and scaling down with our inventory. The red line will show you what some historical U.S. trends, sales trends, and once you get into the late 1960s, you start seeing a big dip. Prior to that, most of the sales were brown spirits, so primarily most of that sales decline is the brown spirits. And obviously brandy, apple brandy, were in that category. It wasn't until the mid 1990s where you started to see it starting to level off a little bit. So the time period that I want to talk about is the last 20 years, where we've started to see the category start to the sales trends were moving up. So at this point now we want to scale up our inventory, and what we really looked at in order to do that. So first of all, we had to have the desire and the commitment to grow our inventory. So obviously I just talked about the category sales trends. We're on the rise at this point in time. And when you're looking at whiskey and brandy and how much you want to lay down, it's really a guesstimate. There is no solid formula. It can be tricky at times. So you really have to look at quite a few different factors. So not only are we looking at the category trends, but we're going to be looking at what's our historical trends. So as we move into 2000s, especially 2005, we really started to see an increase in our blended Applejack and our straight apple brandies. Also, we're going to have to take a look at what our sales projections and our marketing team. What is our marketing plan? What are our projections? Because we have to plan out for, we're talking about inventory. You're talking about 3-4 years down the road, because you have to lay this whiskey and brandy down now in order to sell it 4 years from now. Another thing that we have to look at, historical barrel inventory levels, historical barrel usage. At this point in time in year 2000, that's not important to us because we really had to scale down through the years. So as we move along in the next 5-10 years, it's become very important as we look at our historical usage. Look at current barrel inventory levels as well as that age. Because you really don't want, you have different age statements, so you have to lay down a certain amount for those ages as you come to that, that level. But you don't want to age too long, because you have to look at, it incurs increased carrying costs, increased financing, and as well as you're going to lose a lot more to evaporation. The longer you age, you're going to be losing a lot more of that brandy and spirit to the angel share. Quality of the raw material. We're an agricultural product. We use apples. We use 100% apples, and it doesn't matter what spirit you're producing, you're dependent upon the agricultural product that is being produced. So it depends on what that year is, because it's going to affect the cost. It's going to affect the quality. For apples, it's going to affect the sugar bricks. We want higher sugar bricks to produce a better brandy. It's going to have higher yield when we come to producing our brandy and distillation. So it will come down to seasons. If it's a dry season, we're gonna produce a little bit more, because the drier season you're gonna have higher sugar content. We're gonna have better brandy. So we're gonna want to put down a little bit more to offset the bad years, such as a wet season, too much water content in the apples, less sugar. Quality of the brandy is not as good during a dry season. So you always have to bring that into consideration as well. And most importantly, your budget. What is your cash flow? How much are you willing to invest? How much can you invest? It depends on your cash flow, or if you have to finance, how much are you willing to borrow? So what I want to review with you is kind of just like take you through, the basic calculations of what it's going to cost to lay down brandy, whiskey, or whatever you're producing in 40 years. So what we did, we have our original proof gallon. Apples can cost anywhere between 15 to 30 cents a pound, depending on what quality apple you're getting. To give you an idea, it's an average of 7,000 pounds of apples to produce 1 barrel of apple brandy. So we're using a lot of raw material. So just to give you kind of an easy middle cost, I went with the original proof gallon cost of $20. So we age about 130 proof. Is that our aging proof that we use once we barrel our apple brandy. And so it gives us about 66 original proof gallons. So it's about a cost about $13.20 per barrel, raw material. Our average loss is about 5% per year. So we're looking at 4-year brandy, so it's about 20% loss. So our regaged proof gallons is going to be about 80% of that 66 at 53 gallons. So if you want to find out what your final regaged proof gallon is after the 4 years, it's $24.90 per regaged proof gallon. So that's an additional $4.90. So you have to take into consideration in 4 years, just your carrying cost, your overhead, is an additional $260. But if you're financing, you're going to have additional costs above that. The industry average right now is about 2.5 to 3 cents per month for financing. So if you take that I went with 3 cents, so it's about $1.44 finance cost per month. So if you start with 66 original proof gallons, as we do with the 130 proof, it's going to come out to an additional like $95 per barrel finance. So after 4 years, you add the finance, the overhead, you have about $355 additional cost at the end. So when you're looking at projecting what your costs are going to be, it's original, it's $20. After 4 years, no finance, you got $24.90. But if you're financing, you're up to about $26.70. So you have to use that in your calculations for your final cost. And this is a figure that you really cannot play around with. You've got your basic raw material. There isn't, for scaling, you have to decide how much you want to obviously produce, but that scaling, you really can't cut corners when you're scaling aging inventory. But where you can scale is when you're building your team and your network. Now that after you created a realistic growth target and you've decided how much you're going to produce, now you have to develop a plan and concrete actions that are going to help you generate or achieve this growth. So just some of the things that we have done, we've been a little bit different. We've been in business for many, many years. We have, for internally, we have a lot of old-time employees that we've had many, many years. So with attrition, what we've been able to do, we have older employees that have less technical skills. As they retire, we have younger personnel that have much better technical skills. So we have, they can do basically one person can do the job of two. Part-time ambassadors is a wonderful way because you're not hiring a full-time employee, but we use be able to promote the products and to build the team and talking about our spirits. But when you're building, you have to look at, are you going to do it internal or outsourcing? And that can be very fluid. We did social media was outsourced. Now we do it internally. And payroll, we did internally. Now we outsource. So it always depends on what's working within your company and where you can save costs. IT, informational technology, we outsource. And then we have found that's been very successful for us is using some temporary employment agencies. And the only reason for this is it obviously takes a little bit longer. It's a long process. A hiring process can be very long. But once we bring somebody in, we find that they have the right culture. They fit into our company. They also have the right skill set and so forth. Then we bring them on full time, and we can build the team that way. Have to build a network and collaboration, which in the United States, we're lucky we have the new Craft Beverage Modernization Tax Refund Act that has been a godsend for us. So obviously political lobby is very important for us to keep that in place. We have our food export branded program. So it enables me, offset some of my costs to come to BCB Berlin and to visit export markets and go to shows where I can promote my product. So that's another way for us to build a network. Brokers, we use internationally and in the U.S. It's a perfect avenue to you have somebody representing your brands, but it's not a full-time employee, and it really does help. It's based on what product they're moving along, what product they're selling, and so forth. Obviously, the craft bartending community is a big network for us for our Laird's Applejack products. The orchards, we network distribution and importers. So concrete actions, what else we need to do? We've invested in technology and equipment. Because we've been in business for a long time, we've done some of our own labeling. We've invested in a pressure-sensitive label. Laird's Applejack, our blended product, we had to outsource. Now we have brought it in, and it also has helped us to be more creative with our label and our packaging. We purchased used equipment. We just purchased a miniature line, so we can really push more samples out there into the market. Obviously, updating software systems and so forth, and the consumer relationship management programs, which helps us be much more efficient with communicating with our customers. But most importantly, you have to boost your marketing. You have to secure your sales. How are you going to do that? Everybody has a story. You have to focus on your story. And one thing that we've focused on is our history. Nobody has the history that we have with our products, and that's something we really like to focus on. As I talked about the craft beverage modernization bill, reinvesting those funds, reinvested into equipment. We're also reinvesting it into a museum, building a museum and visiting center. Museum, we're focusing on our history. With the visiting center, we're attracting new customers, and we're taking advantage of the craft beverage tourism, and with the museum, the historical tourism as well, which is very, very large market where we're located in Monmouth County, New Jersey. Take advantage of that branded program. We are really building our export markets, being able to come to markets like this. Obviously, one of an inexpensive way to build your marketing is social media. We actually are now on social media. It took many years. You know, we've been an old-fashioned company, but really, my son has come in, 10th generation. We now have some really nice social media, which is great. So, and as I talked about, we've been developing our broker system. So, how did we grow? How did this work for us by scaling our aging inventory over the 20 years? How did this help us achieve our target growth? Well, one thing, as of 2005, Laird & Company had 0 export markets. As of today, we have 17 export markets, which is something I'm very proud of. We've really been able to grow in that direction. We've had the ability to introduce new expressions of our apple brandy. You know, we had to really scale down for many, many years. Now that we've scaled up, we have much more aging inventory, and we've had 4 new expressions that we've introduced. Additional products are still in the development, and as of by the end of 2020, we should have our visitors center and museum that will be open to the public, and we'd love to invite all of you to come visit.
I might start by asking how many people in the room are currently working with their own brand or with an existing brand. Put your hand up. And how many people are sort of about to do something or thinking of doing something? Okay, good. So that's, I guess, reflecting what we're here to talk about today, which is how to go from the sort of existing position as a brand to growing. And as a 2-year-old brand, that's something that we're grappling with right now. So I'm not standing here with any answers necessarily, but certainly willing to share a perspective on what we're thinking about. Because this is how it feels. And I think you can certainly get this sense even walking around BCB. You can see, you know, within 5 minutes, gin in packaging that you never would have imagined. You can see flavors that you never would have imagined. This is actually a beach in Hong Kong that was flooded by mainland Chinese visitors. Certainly takes away from the enjoyment somewhat. So I guess as a young brand in the current independent spirits market, there are a lot of additional challenges to an established brand, particularly the competitiveness, the crowded market, and also the way that impacts distribution, because you might find that a lot of the quality distribution partners are already busy with some fantastic brands. So that presents a few interesting challenges. Just a bit of background before getting into some of those issues on Never Never Distilling Co., which is a business that I co-founded 2 years ago. So we started pretty small. We purchased a still. It was a demo still. It was pretty cheap. We had 16 square meters in the back of a brewery. We basically asked every brewery and distiller and winery in our region in South Australia if we could have some space, and and one little brewery was kind enough to give us a bit of space for next to nothing. We took about 9 months to do formal research and development at scale. That was after several years of small scale. And then at 4 months old, we were voted 7th highest trending global gin brand by Drinks International. So had a really good impact straight out of the gates. We launched in Asia not too long afterwards with our distribution partner, Singapore, Hong Kong, New Zealand. We'll then jump to 3rd highest trending global gin brand 1 year later, and we're lucky enough to win World's Best Classic Gin at the World Gin Awards in London. So we pretty much had as good a sort of start as you could ask for as a gin brand in a crowded market, but still really, really hard to grow into new markets. So I guess the question there at the bottom is, it's a good start, but we'll never actually achieve scale. Will we sort of break through the sort of industry thresholds that people put on, what they would consider a scale brand? And here are some thoughts on how to give it the best shot. So the first thing is that these days, just being different really isn't enough. Like you can see walking around how many different and new offerings there are. So you have to do more than be different. You have to solve a problem for people, for your customer. So what are you actually providing them? Do they really need a new obscure botanical? Do they really need the same gin in a different bottle? So in our case, it was about sort of going against the trend and actually going back to juniper as the core of gin, but doing it in a really big and complex and contemporary way. So everything we do is really based around juniper, from the production method and the detail that we go into in putting together the gins with multiple components of juniper, through to all of our brand activity, all of our events, all of our collateral and content is really based on that hero botanical. And by doing that, we're basically asking bars and retailers to say, if you only have limited space, why do we deserve a spot? Because we represent this very clear position in the category, and we represent something that isn't fickle, it isn't changing over time, something that deserves a spot. What do you need? Well, firstly, I guess you should all ask the question on whether you do indeed want to scale. So I'm gathering by most people in this room working with established brands that you're all at that point that, yeah, you're up and running and you really do want to achieve scale. But I think it's a common thing in this industry that a lot of people get into it not quite sure, like, is it going to be a small, profitable, local business, or are you aiming to be a global volume brand? And that's a super important question because it completely changes everything about what you're doing. It changes it from, a general business concern to going as fast as you can to do everything to grow as fast as possible. One specific question related to that is the question of branded house versus, let's just say, house of brands. So are you just going to do one thing, or are you going to do a lot of things? Are you going to have multiple products in multiple categories? And if so, are they going to have more than one brand? So we decided to just be one thing, big juniper forward gin. We do some unique products around that, which are all supported products. To Michael's point about collaborations, we've done a juniper Amaro with Black Pearl, which is a very sort of well-regarded bar in Melbourne. We've done an Aquavit with PS40, which is another Australian bar out of Sydney. We made a summer cup with a liqueur producer called Marionette. But all of those products had a connection to our core gin line. And we don't intend to play in any other categories. I think you can be a really successful business as a house of brands, but maybe more so on a local, sort of national level, not on a global level. The 10-second test is a really important one. I've also heard it called the brother-in-law test. I don't know why everyone's hating on brother-in-laws, but basically you need to be able to explain to your brother-in-law in 10 seconds, why they should be interested even in looking at your product. Having something that's globally relevant. So if you take the example of gin, if you focus on really specific local botanicals, yeah, it's a point of difference, it's a point of interest, but is it actually going to be familiar enough to mean that a bartender or a bottle shop anywhere in the world is going to find a place for that product? Having the team with industry knowledge and relationships is critical. So we're a team of 3 founders. My business partner, Sean, was the national brand ambassador for Diageo's Reserve brands in Australia. So he had really deep industry relationships and knowledge. And our other partner, Tim, runs production end to end, which kind of frees me up to focus on markets. So it's really, it's really tough going to scale if you don't have those complementary skill sets in the core of the business. I think these days you've got to have 9 out of 10 or better liquid. I mean, it used to be the case that liquid was like just as long as you're a 7 out of 10, you can get by because the rest is just everything else. I don't think that's the case anymore, really. It's just too competitive now. So you've got to be like at double gold medal standard, and you've got to be winning trophies. Otherwise, there'll be a sort of better quality product there. And you've got to have the pathway to fund your growth, which I'll touch on in a bit more in a moment. A couple of other things in the initial phase is sort of really to hold your discipline. Like, it's really tempting as a 2-year-old brand when someone comes along, like a big bar group, or someone says, "Hey, can you make a gin for us?" And it's like, well, if you do one thing and you sort of stand for that, and then you suddenly change it because such and such bar wants to use like this flavor because it suits their brand, then that really starts to compromise the integrity and the focus of your brand. A lot of local businesses will also take advantage of the cash flow generated from a visitor experience, so like a distillery door or something, which is awesome and can help fund the rest of your business. One good tip there is to try and make it as portable as possible. Like, give it an identity so that maybe you can pop it up in different locations. You can work with bars. You can work in international markets to give people a taste of your at-home experience. A couple of kind of practical points as well. Like Lisa touched on some of the production aspects for scale. So in gin particularly, I would definitely think about single shot versus multi-shot gin, concentrating gin effectively. We, with the really juniper forward heavy style that we made, find it really hard to extend our distillate because we just can't get enough flavor. But technically, for a lot of brands, it's pretty straightforward. So much better to start your R&D with a production process that's driven at scale rather than start with, a one-time gin and then, hope that over the subsequent years you can figure out how to, really scale the production dramatically. Same thing with looking at like your botanical supply chain. Like, if you want to be big, you need to use botanicals that are going to be available over time, that are not going to be like hand foraged and highly seasonal and might be subject to drought and not available in a particular year and that sort of thing. Juniper prices are killing us at the moment, but that is the main thing of our brand, so that's something we've decided to accept. And then some practical elements for scaling. So my background before Never was in private equity and financial investment, so had some good understanding of shareholder structures and funding. So even from the early days, good to have really clear shareholder arrangements in place. Like the number of times I've had distillers tell me, "Oh, the 3 of us started this brand. We all put the stills together, and so-and-so was producing and so-and-so was selling. And then they just decided not to come to work anymore." And it's like, what do you do then? You've got to have a negotiation. You've got to buy your other partner out. So really baking all that in at the beginning is helpful. And having generally a shareholding structure that won't have sort of deadlocks, like 2 equal partners is always tricky. I won't go too much into the funding options because there were other sessions that really went into detail on this, and it is a sort of whole topic on its own. But I think if you do make the decision to pursue scale, you obviously have to put funding behind it. Like in this environment, you've got brand new brands putting huge amounts of money behind their market presence. So you just have to have that pathway really laid out. It's quite difficult in this market to build a brand incrementally. It's possible, but investing in ahead of the curve is important. We've always taken that approach of just taking the next step before really we've had the cash flow to fund it. There's obviously a whole spectrum of things through equity, crowdfunding, private debt. Generally, bank finance not available for early stage distilleries, but established profitable businesses might be fine there. And that's pretty much all I had.
Hi everybody, my name's James Chase. Very rare that you see a lot of brands that are stupid enough to put their name on the packaging. So we always say, like,
not so rare here.
yeah. But the George Foreman grill, but we really do put the name above the door, which is a really rare thing to see these days, and it shows the instillment of family and everything that we wanted to create. But I'll kind of do a little bit of the history about Chase and then touch on a few kind of key points about where we found our magic, I suppose, because everybody here is looking for their magic or looking for what is going to be the next big thing. But the main thing I always get, and what you talk to these guys or a lot of the producers here today, it's passion. And for me, like the number one thing out of anything that you're ever going to do, and whether you are going to scale tomorrow or in 50 years' time, 100 years' time, if we're still alive, is passion. Because even if you fail, you're doing something that you genuinely love. And I think that's so important. I think there's often a case that people get into this business because of the money or the glory that they can achieve. But if all else fails, you've still got the passion of doing something that you genuinely love. And I'm a really, really, really big believer of that. So I think for me, always the core of that is very key. Chase is a really great story. Our family have been farmers for generations, so we really do know our potatoes, and not our onions. We're big potato farmers, and we're from a part of England that grows potatoes incredibly well. So we're between London and Birmingham, if you guys don't know, and it's got some of the most amazing soil, I think, in the world. It's rich, red, it's fertile, and it grows these most amazing, gnarly spuds. But going back a bit further, I learned the other week, actually, that my great-great-great-great-granddad was apothecary to the royal family, which was really great. So we were supplying all the medicines and the drugs to the royal family. And in a way, we're kind of doing that again now. We're back in the business of being an apothecary. But yeah, Dad really kind of drove our revolution from humble potato farmers into being at a booze festival in Berlin. Really, we really struggled to make a living in the 90s, and in the UK especially, we have huge supermarkets that really dominate the pricing of commodity goods. They have big buying power, and the consumer a lot of times wants cheap product very quickly, and the farmer a lot of the time gets really kind of stuck. Things are changing now because we're living more of a fast-paced life. We do have more of a connection to the farmer, and I think there's more of an appreciation to buy locally, to buy sustainably, but to buy better. I'd say it's not completely changed, but there are certain hallmarks in society now of associating the farmer into what we do. So we had really, really bad times, and with every bad time, you need to diversify. So my dad had literally been fed up of being treated like a middleman, and wanted to start making a margin again, because what's the point of being in business if you're not making any cash? So I remember coming back from college one day in about 2001, and he'd built this deep fat fryer in the workshop and started to make potato chips, or what Americans call potato chips. And he said, well, if I'm not making a margin out of the potatoes I'm selling to the supermarket, maybe I can make a margin selling them for crisps. And we built a great crisp company in the UK that's gone on now to be a world beater. It's called Tyrrell's, and it was all about connecting the farmer with your product. And a time when social media wasn't around, barriers to entry were probably a lot greater in some respects, but it was a fantastic brand, and it had great run length, and it's still going around today. And I'm really pleased that we've done that for the snacking space. The distillery came around when we were actually back out in America looking for deep fat fryers. Where else do you go other than America than the home of deep fat frying? And we were up in Pennsylvania, and we were just heading back to the airport, and we hit a few bars. And it was around 2007, and the government at that time had just kind of pulled the jurisdictions down for what still sizes that you could bring in, and it was really the start of the craft movement over there. I always say America kind of fosters trends, and then the world catches on it, and a few years later, and there's a couple of anomalies now, but I really do think because of their size, scale, and wealth, America has this most amazing ability of really encapsulating what's going to be the next big thing. And yeah, 2006, 2007, Americans started to dip their toe into the craft spirit revolution. Brands like Aviation Gin, which is now owned by Ryan Reynolds, but they were kind of having a bit of fun, and most amazing gin called Death's Door. Brian was starting that up, and a really small back then bourbon called Hudson Bourbon had just got going. And we saw all these brands in a bar one day, and this bartender kind of were pouring these big cup measures, and that was the light bulb moment that we were like, this is pretty awesome. Why are there none of these spirits back in the UK? And yeah, we had a few drinks that night, and we went out to New York the next day and went shopping and bought a bootload of booze back to the UK, and we realized that the craft spirit movement really hadn't developed yet in the UK. So I think at about 10 o'clock in the morning, the water fountain was emptied of all the cups, and we were pouring all these little shots of whiskey, and by 11:30, I think we were pretty relaxed, and we had a few drinks, and we really kind of then, I think after a few drinks, realized that, why don't we have a go at this? And I think Dad's always been a creator as opposed to a keeper of traditions over time. And a few years later, we realized that we had a huge surplus of smaller potatoes, too small to make the potato chips. So we decided to build the UK's first craft distillery. And I say craft as inverted commas. We had a huge tradition of distilling, particularly gins, in the UK, but there was no small batch craft discerning gins, particularly of that time. So we did a lot of research. We did a lot more drinking, and we realized that some of the best stills that we could buy came from Austria, and they're all copper. We put them in the still house, and our first bottle of actually potato vodka came off the line in 2008, and to this day, we've always said that the vodka is very key to what we do. It's much like our Burberry trench coat, and it's a great example that Burberry was built up to make trench coats in the war. But now they're probably more famous for making girls' handbags or perfume or other trinkets. But whatever time you see Burberry, you'll always see that trench coat, and it's very iconic in what they do. And it's a very irrelevant case, but similar in some ways, that the vodka is always very important to Chase. Even though 85% of our sales are now gin, the vodka is everything to us because it's the reason why that we started. And that's kind of one of my main points about scale, is never lose the reason why you started. Because as soon as a big brand starts to lose the reason why it started, its traditions are lost, and often cases they're just answering to shareholders. So I always say that you've got to be really core to your opinion, even like Never Never really owning that juniper run gin. And I think that's so important, is finding what your principle is and sticking to that. And for us, it was always the potato vodka. Vodka's in a really crap time at the moment. I think bartenders realize or think that it has no taste or flavor. But at Chase, we've always been on a mission to say that potatoes, in our case, we think they're some of the best tasting spirits. They're bloody hard to distill. There's about 75% of a potato is water, but we do think the mouthfeel and the texture of a potato is pretty cool. And it's the reason, again, why we started. And like a great vineyard, our distillery surrounds itself with those fields that grow the very crops. So Chase really is, we are championing field to bottle spirits. That's our mission, and we really want to get people as interested in distilling as we are, but actually to appreciate the whole end-to-end production. So, and it's not a bad thing, but there's very few distillers out there now that actually farm their product all the way through to hand bottling on site. And we've always believed that as farmers, we love to give that value chain all the way through our process. Chase always has 4 key killer blocks, and it's really important that everybody in Chase's business understands these and what they stand for, because As soon as we start deviating away from these, we will, again, maybe lose our ethos or purpose. And, thanks to our great team and what we are now, hopefully everybody will come back to yours. So as you scale and as you see potential in a market, I always think it's great to probably carve out a few key elements that make you great. So for us, it's family, but it's not just the family, me, my dad and my brother. Family is our whole team at Chase. It's everything to us, and we really do have a family mentality right from the early days all the way through. Quality is everything, because at the end of the day, it's the taste that you're getting when you're trying delicious spirits. That goes right through to the tasting side of things as well. We've won a great deal of awards, but we always get people to try our spirits neat. And especially with gin, when you're often mixing with tonic, sugar can be the killer of any great taste. So every time, it's always so important to Chase that we get people to try our spirits neat. And then right at the end, field to bottle, it's everything to us, from growing the raw ingredients right through to hand bottling. And it's actually having a home place as well within that. So we're from Herefordshire. We don't see many tourists. If you're going through Herefordshire, you're probably going to Wales, and not many people are going through to Wales. So we find our home very very quiet. But over the last few years, tourism has really boomed, and that's probably one of the last points that I'll finish on. That everything to us is our home place. So as you scale, never lose a sense of where you come from. And Herefordshire always kind of proudly sits right on top of our bottle. So yeah, those are our 4 points. Scaling with pleasure, and we're going to do some questions, I think, now. So yeah.
So we're going to open up for questions, but I thought I'd just kick things off with one quick question, which is that, at different stages of your life cycle, at no point did you, as far as I know, take external investment to help you to scale. And I know a lot of people, that would be the fastest route to scale. So would you, or why haven't you, or what has been the key to not having to do that? Maybe I'll start with you, Lisa.
Well, we actually had a 10-year history where we did take investors in.
Okay, great.
And after 10 years, the family purchased it 100% back.
Right.
So we found that did not work for us, because we still ran the company. We had full control, but we wanted it to be 100% family owned again. So there was a 10-year period that we did try that. We will never do that again. So it will continue, and as long as we continue to have generations, and my son has come on board, so we're lucky. We're moving forward, but yeah, no, we plan on keeping it 100% family owned.
I'm going to go in reverse chronological order. So James.
Yeah, I mean, I spent a lot of my time out in America, and the challenges we face is distribution, and there's been a lot of times where we think that probably a partnership is the best form for our business, and we are constantly reviewing that and where we go and how we need to scale. But we're still family owned and run, and I think in our case we were very lucky. Well, I'd say lucky. It took a bloody lot of hard work, but we came off the back of our first brand, which was Tyrrell's, and as we sold part of that company, Dad probably could have chilled out somewhere on a holiday, but he decided to plow it all back in again at Chase. So we were very lucky that we had that initial financing to start with. But yeah, it's a constant thing that we review, and we're very proud, ultimately, that our name is on that bottle. Sort of, we choose to do. We need to make sure that we need to be around in 100 years' time, like you guys. Yeah.
Yeah, you take a lot of pride with your name being on the bottle.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah. George?
Well, I guess it's really important, if you are going to take on investment, that you know what you're going to do with those funds. So we have managed to get to this point without the need for external capital. We're fortunate that the founders had sufficient capital to get to that point. But we have actually in the last month taken on private debt. So basically friends, family, fans sort of debt, which is funding the build of our new distillery. And then the next phase would be really pushing heavily into international markets. So we'll assess whether we need to raise funds for that.
Thank you. I'm just kind of wondering, like, obviously, I know Chase very well and some of the brands, but do you actually consider scaling from day one before you actually launch the product? Is it like, at what stage did you actually start considering scaling? Because obviously, you don't know what trends are going to go into. Like, you probably didn't think you were going to end up producing the pink grapefruit and pomelo gin when you started. So how much of the percent, like, how much did you think about scaling from day one before you actually launch a product, basically?
We got into it again because we're passionate about spirits and wanted other people to feel the same way that we do about spirits. But at the same time, we did look at it as a business opportunity to scale. And unlike whiskies, you know, you can sell straight off the bat, which is fantastic. And it's a hard thing for us because of our field to bottle nature. We do have limitations with how much we can scale. We're not buying in NGS and redistilling, and there's probably been occasions where we probably looked at our business model and questioned it for sure. It's just how much we scale and what our aspiration is, and we're at a certain size now where we're above craft in that small scale respect, but surely way below the big guys. So it's a very hard area, but we're free because we're selling straight away. Yeah.
All right, guys. Well, let's take a second and thank our panelists. You all did fantastic. It's great to have you
Thank
today.
you.